Much like any other medium, anime is not monolithic in nature. It is made up of dozens of different genres, and each of those genres has dozens of different subgenres and tropes associated with them. And again, much like other mediums, there are certain genres that are looked down on by a large portion of anime fans. The moe boom in the early to mid 2000s experienced quite a lot of backlash, and the slice of life genre, more specifically cute girls doing cute things, is only just now becoming as respected as its contemporaries. In contrast, isekai, formerly a niche genre even within anime and often sought out for that very reason, is now becoming a seasonal pariah because it is being cranked out so often and with such horrid results. But of course, the socially unacceptable genre that we'll be talking about today is the idol genre, one that, while having existed for decades at this point, is still seen as some illegitimate stepchild of anime culture, with the genre itself having been born from the idol culture that's existed in Japan for nearly half a century. Whether it's being blamed for the degeneracy of its audience or the death of another genre entirely, god damn it, Kiguk. Idol anime are spared no shortage of hate from the general anime populace, and for a while, I bought into that cynicism. Idol anime are trashy, plastic, soulless cash grabs, and I shouldn't waste my time on them. When you're trying to only watch the best of the best, it's nice to think that you can just avoid an entire genre and focus on other things you like already. And then Zombieland Saga happened, and I realized that a lot of the tropes in idol anime that I was told I hated were just the same tropes I saw everywhere else, but reinterpreted through the idol lens, despite some people claiming that this was just another dumb idol anime. Before we go any further, I want to clarify that I am in no way an expert on idol anime. That should be clear from the title. If you want to hear from someone with more experience in this genre, go watch What the What. He's got like 4 different videos on this shit already. This video is simply me showing you how Zombieland Saga changed my perspective on this genre as a whole. This doesn't mean that the criticism leveled against this genre doesn't apply to some of its lesser members, but I want to show you that much like anime itself, the idol genre is not monolithic, and that Zombieland Saga can serve as your introduction if you're still wary. I am not analyzing the entirety of the idol genre because that's practically impossible, just Zombieland Saga as an idol anime. In order to get that across, we'll need to address some of the big complaints that are often pinned to idol anime on the whole, and I'm going to stay purely textual with this one for the most part. If you have problems with the idol industry itself, then that's totally fine. Perfect Blue even addresses this to some degree. But that's way too big a discussion for this video, and a show about people being raised from the dead against their will to become an idol group is definitely not going to make the strongest pro-industry case in that regard, so I'll leave it at that. Let's start with the common complaints. One of the more egregious ones is regarding bland characterization. When characters are built with fulfilling a specific archetype in mind, it's easy to fall under the misconception that the characters are mostly flat and uninteresting or have very little meaning behind them. However, just because a character fulfills an archetype does not mean that they are completely defined by that archetype. I find this to be especially true in Zombieland Saga as it presents several textbook examples of gap moe. To massively oversimplify the term, gap moe occurs when a pair of contradictory characteristics work together to create a more endearing and likable character. For example, Saki, our aggressive and confrontational biker girl, actually has a soft spot for certain aspects of Saga's culture. She's head over heels for drive-in Tori and gets super excited to take part in the GAT Olympics. Normally, the biker and punk archetypes are built around being super tough and not really being interested in anything that doesn't come off as cool. Thus, these characters are often given a cutesy side that they keep hidden from the world that makes them feel less one-dimensional. However, in Saki's case, she is more than happy to spread her love for those passions with those around her. So not only does she feel more complex than her general archetype, but she also avoids the typical cliches associated with said archetype and becomes a more endearing character in the process. There are plenty more instances of this in Zombieland Saga, like how Lily's hyper-cutesy appearance is punctuated with sardonic and often outright rude remarks, and these small details help to create a more fleshed out cast. There's also the complaint that idol anime don't represent a realistic portrayal of idol culture, that everything is too optimistic and overly positive, that these kind of idol groups could never exist in reality and as such make for a poor narrative. To which I say, really?
No, seriously. Really? What planet have you been living on for the past 60 years?
Craftsdwarf already has an entire video on this, but to put it in my own words, anime is a medium of exaggeration, much like most other fictional mediums you will encounter. It is not meant to be a one-to-one representation of reality, and expecting it to be so is just kinda silly. Furthermore, understanding why it differs from reality so much is a much more interesting idea. Despite how often the characters in Zombieland Saga fail horrendously, the show almost always has an extremely positive and optimistic tone for a very important reason, this being the nature of idols as a whole. They are meant to project this air of excessive positivity in order to inspire their fans, which then inspire them in kind. Becoming a successful artist is something to be very happy about if you enjoy what you're doing, so I don't see a problem with having a hyper-optimistic outlook in this situation. That's not to say that they can never have a negative emotion ever, that's not true for even the most saccharine of idol shows, but rather that the overall message is meant to be one of encouragement. That despite the obstacles you have to overcome, you can still hold on to your optimism and continue forward. You know, the same thing that Shonen Jump series have been saying a lot nowadays. But what about the awful CG? How can that be seen as acceptable animation? Okay, this is a fair point to some extent. Ideally, all of these shows should go for what Idolmaster does and create incredible dance sequences using traditional animation. However, as much as me from 2 years ago would say otherwise, CG is not inherently bad, even when it draws attention to itself. What's important to keep in mind is not that the CG exists, but whether or not it is good CG, or better yet, the context in which the CG is used. Yes, the CG in Zombieland Saga isn't that good until near the end, and in any other context that might bring the show down a bit. However, as I've pointed out in a previous video, sometimes bad CG can actually add to a scene rather than detract. This robotic, awkward-looking dance sequence in episode 3 looks kinda terrible, which ends up playing into the idea that the performance is kinda terrible in the actual story. And the fact that the CG gets more emotive and less distracting as the series goes on lines up with the girls improving with time. Is it still kinda hard to watch even with that knowledge? Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if you still found this presentation off-putting, but I still think it's a neat idea. However, I think the most important complaint that needs to be addressed is that idol anime have no point, that they merely exist to perpetuate the sale of a product.
First of all, hello, and welcome to the anime industry. Would you like a wall scroll? Second,
just because a series has an excessive amount of merchandise tied to it doesn't mean it exists solely for that merchandise. Idol anime, Zombieland in particular, do have meaning, and we can see this rather clearly through one of my favorite characters in the show, Ai. Prior to becoming a zombie, Ai was the leader of a fairly popular idol group that was finally starting to hit it off, only to be literally struck down during her big performance. After a brief period of skepticism, Ai becomes dead set on becoming a top idol again, willing to go to any lengths and practice as much as possible to make that happen. It's a character I find extremely endearing and relatable because she is the most literally me character I saw in all of 2018. When she says, that hits more than a few nerves for me personally, and it's in that moment that I finally got Zombieland Saga. I always vaguely understood the becoming a successful idol narrative, but I never really got it until now. These are characters with dreams that they are dead set on achieving. Become a top star, win the hearts of the masses, dominate Japan, or maybe just succeed at something for once in your life. It all ties back into what I mentioned about optimism earlier. Pursuing your passion with a smile on your face, even when the journey there seems impossible, is the core message of a lot of idol anime, and it's no different in Zombieland. What makes each one distinct, much like every other genre, is everything else that fills in the blanks. The setting, the character chemistry, the other themes it draws on, and more. At least in Zombieland Saga, that is what the core of an idol anime is, to inspire via optimism and allow its viewers to watch a group of people achieve their dreams. Again, much like many other popular anime. If you have problems with a specific idol anime, then you're free to complain about them, but to dismiss the entire genre as a whole means that you're going to miss out on some great anime experiences. I'm very happy that Zombieland Saga helped me get over my bias against idol anime, and I'm definitely looking forward to whichever one I end up watching next. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourke Tanjoin, Christine Seibert, Tim Johnson, Call Me Catlord, Diane Wierzbicki, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.